In 1999, someone managed to break into systems connected to NASA. Investigators expected an experienced cybercriminal, someone with years of knowledge, advanced tools, and the ability to hide their identity. Someone who knew exactly how to disappear. But when they discovered who was behind the attack, the truth was almost impossible to believe. The person behind one of NASA's most shocking security incidents wasn't a professional hacker. He wasn't a government employee. He wasn't a cybersecurity expert. He was a 15-year-old teenager sitting in his bedroom with a computer. His name was Jonathan James. But how does a teenager go from being curious about computers to becoming the focus of a federal investigation? Before the FBI knew his name, Jonathan James was just another teenager growing up in Miami. But unlike most teenagers, Jonathan wasn't interested in computers just for games or entertainment. He wanted to understand what was happening underneath the screen, how programs worked, how networks connected, and how systems could fail. Jonathan became fascinated by finding weaknesses that other people overlooked, and the timing couldn't have been better, because in the late 1990s, the internet was still a new and unexplored world. Hidden communities were forming online, where people pushed technology further than most people understood. For Jonathan, the internet wasn't just something to use. It became a challenge. At first, Jonathan wasn't looking for money. He wasn't trying to become famous. He wanted to prove something, that he could understand systems most people couldn't even see. And every challenge he overcame made the next one harder to ignore. But there was a problem. The bigger the challenge became, the bigger the consequences became. Because Jonathan wasn't just exploring personal computers anymore. He was looking at systems belonging to powerful organizations. Systems designed to protect important information. And eventually, Jonathan found a target that would change everything. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, a government organization connected to national security. This was no longer just a teenager testing his skills. This was the moment curiosity became a federal investigation. Jonathan had already proven he could find weaknesses in systems, but now he was about to enter a completely different world. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, known as DTRA, was responsible for protecting information connected to America's national security. It was not a normal computer system. It was not a school project. It was a government organization. And somehow, a teenager had found a way inside. Jonathan later admitted that he had installed an unauthorized backdoor into one of DTRA's computer servers located in Dulles, Virginia. This gave him access that he was never supposed to have. But he didn't stop there. Using that access, Jonathan installed a program known as a sniffer, a tool designed to capture information moving through a network. And suddenly, thousands of messages passing between DTRA employees were exposed, along with usernames, passwords, and other sensitive information, including details connected to official military computers. The teenager sitting in his bedroom was now inside systems belonging to an organization connected to national defense. And this was the moment the situation changed, because curiosity had become something much bigger. Authorities were no longer looking at a teenager experimenting with computers. They were looking at a serious security incident. The question was no longer, can he do it? The question became, who is this person? Investigators began following the digital trail. Every connection, every piece of evidence, every mistake. Because even the most skilled hackers leave behind something. And slowly, the investigation started moving closer to Jonathan. But Jonathan still had no idea how close authorities were getting. For months, his actions remained hidden behind a computer screen, until one day, everything changed. On January 26, 2000, law enforcement arrived at Jonathan James's home. The investigation that started with a teenager exploring computers had reached his front door. The raid changed everything. The teenager who had spent years exploring computers was suddenly facing the full attention of federal authorities. Jonathan James had gone from being a curious teenager to becoming the youngest person ever convicted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. But the story was more complicated than just a headline, because behind the attack, there was no simple motive. Jonathan wasn't chasing money. He wasn't trying to sell information. He wasn't trying to become famous. He was a teenager who wanted to understand how far his skills could go. But the systems he accessed were not games. They belonged to organizations responsible for protecting important information. And that line was the difference between curiosity and a crime. Jonathan's case became one of the most talked about hacking stories of its time because it showed the world something nobody expected, that someone sitting alone in a bedroom could create a security problem for powerful organizations. But years later, the story took an even darker turn. Jonathan James continued to deny involvement in some later cyber incidents. However, in 2008, he became involved in another investigation. And on May 18, 2008, Jonathan James died by suicide at the age of 24. His death shocked many people who remembered his story, because the teenager who once fascinated the world with his technical ability was gone far too young. Today, Jonathan James remains one of the most remembered figures in early hacking history. Not because he was the most powerful hacker, not because he caused the most damage, but because his story represented something unusual: a teenager, a computer, and a curiosity that went further than anyone expected. A reminder that talent can be powerful, but without responsibility, even the greatest skills can lead somewhere dangerous. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Jonathan James, the teenager who hacked NASA just in his bedroom.